Time to learn from my first mistake. It happens, you guys. Mistakes are going to happen constantly, consistently. It's about how you handle them, your mindset, and how you use them to learn and move forward. So let me share my first mistake with you so that you can learn from my experiences. Welcome to Brick by Brick, a step-by-step YouTube series that documents the building of a company from start to finish.
Okay, there. Yeah.
I wanted to use a molder in the United States. I really wanted to use a molder in America because, I thought it would be better. I wanted to find someone local that I could work with, that I could talk to, and work hand in hand, pick up the prototypes from, etc. And so I found someone local who makes mud molds. MUD stands for Master Unit Die, and they're typically molds that are made out of aluminum. They don't last as long. They can probably only shoot maybe 25 to 50,000 units max, and they're not nearly as durable as steel molds, which can do hundreds of thousands of parts. But I needed to just get a cheaper mold made. Typically, steel molds can cost like upwards of $30,000 sometimes, but mud molds are significantly cheaper. Mud molds should cost you between $2,000 to $5,000 depending on the complexity and what you're doing. But like I said, they don't last as long and they only work with certain materials. So I went to this molder, I showed him the CAD designs, and I said, hey, this is what I need. He said, okay, no problem. I can make this happen. A couple weeks go by, maybe 3 weeks or so, and I reach out. I'm like, hey, what's the progress? Where are we at? And he's like, oh, you hadn't followed up with me recently, so I just thought it wasn't a project that was important to you. And I was like, no, I absolutely delegated this to you. Like, what's going on here? And so that was my first red flag. My first red flag was that this molder couldn't manage his time properly. But nonetheless, we decided to move forward. I paid him half the deposit. It was like $1,500. And I'm like, all right, let's get this done. I need some prototypes. And if you look at the other camera, this is what we came up with. Now, I don't have the small version of the prototype for this battery because I ended up giving them all away for testing purposes, but I do have the big version, and I have our newer prototype with it, so you can see the differences. So this molder decided to use a material called Dynaflex, and you can see that it's kind of shiny, and it's almost like rigid in a way. It's not soft. It's like hard almost. And it has like this white, chalky kind of texture to it. It's smooth. It's just not that nice. There's a huge mold line on the side. On the small vape case, the injection line was right here, right where your eyes go every single time. It's on the vape. And so having the injection line where the mold goes in right here, it was just an eyesore. Not to mention there's varying thicknesses through this, and like the sides are like way thicker than the fronts, and it just needed a lot of work. So I came back to him and I said, hey, look, this is all well and good, but we need to move the injection port. Like, it should not have been put right at eye level. Like, let's put it down at the bottom or on the side. And the injection port is where they squirt in the melted TPE, the melted polymer, the melted plastic, the melted silicone into the mold. And it leaves a small, leaves a small mark. Not to mention, if you look at it from the side, you can see that it kind of bulges out around the openings, and it's just not that clean of a product. And so I brought these changes up to him and I said, hey man, like, we need to change this stuff. We need to move the injection thing. We need to do all this. And he got a little frustrated with me and a little upset and was like, well, are you going to pay for all of that stuff? And of course I was going to pay for it, but I also expect the molders to use good judgment and also, use their expertise to make the best mold possible. But in this case, it wasn't even that good of a mold. It didn't really serve our purposes, and it was kind of crappy, honestly. It was a poor material choice, poor timelines, not good communication, and then failure to want to work better and improve. And so I was just, second strike, I was like, you know what? Basically what had happened is he got really upset with me for telling him that his work wasn't up to standards, and I did it in a kind way, but nonetheless, he took a great amount of offense to it and started getting really upset with me. Like, wouldn't answer my calls, didn't want to talk to me, would only text, angry text, and I was like, you know what? Fine, I'm done. Time to move on. When you come across situations like this where two people butt heads, one person wants one thing, one wants the other, you have to understand that you don't have the full picture. In situations like that, you have to take the higher road and move on. You have to. It's the only way you can continue to keep your sanity and do business. So in this case, I'm just like, you know what? There's probably something going on in his life that I didn't know about. The point is that I don't know. And I need very clear objectives fulfilled. I need a good prototype with a good reliable mold maker and a good reliable manufacturer. So far, this person didn't fit the bill. So I got my money back and I severed the relationship. So I went to my industrial designer, Greg, and I said, Greg, my molder didn't work out. I need someone else. Can you hook me up with one of your most reliable people? I don't care where in the world they are, but I need someone who can understand what do I want to accomplish and can get things done timely for me. And that's when he connected me with my molder in China. So, learn from my lessons and don't keep beating a dead horse and trying to make a square peg fit in a round hole. If you have to move on, you have to move on. It's worth it because now we have this prototype, and this prototype is much better. So there was a small gap in time, and I want to talk about that really quick so that we can all be on the same page. Once I had these prototypes, I had 10 of each, I started doing some market testing. I sent them out to a handful of people I know that have stizzies, and I said, use it. Please use it. Let me know what you think. What do you want? What do you want to be better? What sucks about it? All I want is negative feedback. And I got it. I learned that it wasn't fun to touch and play with. It was too smooth and too slick. This little divot right here, just didn't look good. People didn't like it. They didn't like the branding. I had to take the branding off because, Stizzy's not our brand. We have to change it. It was varying thickness. It slid off the case a little bit. It was hard to get on, and it didn't show the battery lights. It didn't have room in the case to show where the battery lights would show through. And so these were all changes I needed to make. So I went back to Greg and I said, Greg, this is what we need to do. We need to make all of these changes and then we get to make new prototypes. And so we did it. And let me show you a little bit about what that looks like. This is some of our original designs, by the way, our original prototypes. Kind of cool. So this is where we started with our CAD designs, and we kind of transitioned a little bit, getting rid of this little notch and going simple, and we ended up with this. This is the final render of the prototypes for our design. After having gone through that experience with the molder, having had a brief iteration of testing periods with people that I know and respect their opinions of, this is where we arrived. Now, you'll notice that the URL is wrong. We're going to talk about that in a minute. That was another mistake I made, but that's okay. So you can see here that we have a nice, long, smooth case. It has holes in the bottom for the battery, light to show through. It's got a hole in the bottom for the charger. It looks clean. These are really nice renders. This is a 3D model that Greg created in SolidWorks, and I can take this 3D model and I can send it to my molder, and I can get molds made and parts shot that look just like this. This is a great way to go. Now we know we've been able to do one basic prototype. So I wouldn't say that it wasn't worth it working with that first molder who didn't really jive with me, because I was able to get some prototypes and I was able to figure out what I didn't want. And that's almost as important as figuring out what you do want. And so we knew what we didn't want, and it gave us a chance to do some minor testing, which led us to this prototype. So all in all, I'm grateful for the experience, and I don't have anything bad to say about them. It just didn't work out for us. This is what we arrived at, and I love it. And these aren't going to be the final colors, but they do give you an example of what the final cases are going to look like. Now, real quick, let's talk about this URL, because that's another mistake that I made, and we're going to address it later. But I don't own myvapecase.com. I screwed up. I own myvapecases.com, and I also own vapecase.store, but I don't own myvapecase.com. And so I screwed up and I put the wrong URL on there, and I couldn't purchase it because it was like 10 grand. So I had to make a change in the mold after we got this done, and it cost me $1,500 to redo that change. This URL mistake, not checking my work, cost me $1,500 to fix. Use that for food for thought. I just wanted to share that with you, but nonetheless, we've gotten our prototypes to a point where we have a CAD design and we're ready to get some second round real prototypes made. And I'm really, really excited to share those with you. So here's what happens next. Now that we have a design, we're gonna get these molds made with our new molder in China, with the correct URL, with everything correct, the durometer correct. We're gonna use Shore 50 of the silicone so it's nice and bendy and flexy. And we're gonna make it happen. While the molder is working on the molds and shooting the prototypes for us to send over, we're gonna be focusing on the packaging and getting the rest of the company squared away. And that's what we're gonna talk about in the next video.